Captain Lee Dong-woo stood in the observation deck above the Galactic Council chambers, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the morning session begin. Below him, representatives from 47 different species took their seats in the great crystal amphitheater. The air hummed with translator devices converting thousands of different sounds into something resembling universal communication. He had attended these sessions for 3 years now, and each one felt exactly the same. The powerful species spoke. First, the weak ones listened. The humans waited their turn and usually went home disappointed. Ambassador Park So-jin sat at the human delegation table, reviewing her notes one final time. She had prepared for months for today's presentation. The request was simple: permission for humanity to establish 3 new colonies in the Outer Rim territories. The planets were empty, hostile worlds that no other species wanted. Perfect for humans, who seemed to thrive wherever other beings could not. "The session will now come to order," announced the council speaker, a tall, crystalline being whose voice rang like bells. "First on today's agenda is Petition 2847 from the Human Federation regarding territorial expansion." Park So-jin rose smoothly and walked to the central speaking platform. Lee watched her move with the careful grace that all human diplomats had learned over the decades. Never too fast, never too aggressive, always calm, always reasonable. "Honored members of the council," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Humanity respectfully requests permission to establish colonies on 3 uninhabited worlds in Sector 7G. These planets are designated as Class 4 hostile environments, unsuitable for most galactic species." A low murmur ran through the assembled. Aliens. Lee could see some of them exchanging what might have been amused looks. The idea that anyone would want to live on Class 4 worlds seemed ridiculous to beings who preferred garden planets with perfect weather. Chancellor Vexthul of the Velkari hegemony raised one of his 4 arms. He was an impressive figure, standing nearly 3 meters tall with silver skin that caught the chamber's light. The Velkari controlled 17 star systems and commanded respect throughout the galaxy. "The chair recognizes Chancellor Vexthul," the speaker announced. "I must object to this request," Vexthul said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "While the humans have proven useful as auxiliary forces in border conflicts, they lack the experience necessary for independent colonial administration. These territories would be better managed by more established civilizations." Park So-jin's expression never changed, but Lee saw her shoulders tighten slightly. He had watched her practice this presentation dozens of times. She was ready for this objection. "With respect, Chancellor, humanity has successfully maintained 17 colonies for over a century. Our administrative record shows consistent population growth, economic development, and peaceful relations with neighboring systems." "Under supervision," interrupted another voice. This came from Trade Minister Clixith of the Merengue Confederation. The slug-like being's skin glistened under the lights as he spoke. "Human colonies have prospered because they operate under established galactic oversight. Independent expansion is an entirely different matter." More murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Lee felt his jaw tighten. The same arguments, the same dismissive tone. Humans were useful, but only when properly managed. They could fight in alien wars and work dangerous jobs, but they could not be trusted to govern themselves beyond their current borders. Park So-jin tried again. "The proposed colonies would primarily serve as agricultural and mining settlements. These worlds contain resources that humanity can extract safely, while most other species would find the environments too dangerous for profitable operation." "Perhaps that is precisely the problem," said a new voice. Representative Ziltar of the Zorathi Collective spoke in harmonic tones that resonated through the chamber's crystal structure. Species that can survive in such harsh conditions may lack the refined sensibilities necessary for proper galactic citizenship. Lee's hands clenched involuntarily. There it was. The real reason behind all the polite objections. Humans came from Earth, a Class 5 death world where everything was trying to kill everything else. They had evolved as predators on a planet that bred survivors. To the galaxy's more civilized species, this made them useful, but dangerous. Strong enough to fight wars, hardy enough to work in hostile environments, but too aggressive and unpredictable to be trusted with real power. The Zorathi representative raises valid concerns, Chancellor Vexthul continued. The humans have served admirably as shock troops and manual laborers. Their physical capabilities are impressive, but expansion rights are typically reserved for species that have demonstrated cultural sophistication and diplomatic maturity. Park Seo-jin stood quietly at the podium, letting the words wash over her. Lee knew she was calculating her next move. She had prepared for this too. Years of careful diplomacy had taught her to expect such responses. Humanity has participated in 47 joint military operations, mediated 12 trade disputes, and contributed to 17 scientific research projects over the past decade, she said calmly. We have honored every treaty, met every obligation, and maintained peaceful relations with all galactic species. As subordinate partners, Trade Minister Clixith pointed out, the question before us today is whether humans are ready for equal status in territorial matters. The debate continued for another hour. Other species offered their opinions, most echoing the same themes. Humans were valuable allies, but not quite ready for full independence. Perhaps in another century or two, when they had evolved beyond their Death World origins. Lee watched Park Seo-jin handle each objection with professional grace. She never raised her voice, never showed frustration, never displayed any of the predator instincts that the aliens found so unsettling. She was the perfect diplomat, which was exactly why she would fail. Finally, the vote was called. It went exactly as Lee had expected. 34 species voted against the petition. 8 voted in favor. 5 abstained. The 3 worlds that humanity wanted to colonize would remain empty rather than be given to a species too dangerous to trust. Park Seo-jin returned to her seat without visible emotion. The council moved on to the next item of business, something about trade regulations in the inner systems. Lee left the observation deck and met her in the corridor outside. The usual excuses? He asked. The usual excuses, she confirmed. Too aggressive, too unpredictable, need more supervision. She paused, looking tired. Sometimes I wonder if we're fighting the wrong battle, Dongwoo. Before he could respond, Park's communication device chimed urgently. She checked the display, and her face went pale. What is it? Priority message from Earth Command, she said quietly. The Velkari attacked 3 of our agricultural colonies this morning. Unprovoked strikes. They're calling it pacification of illegally established settlements. Lee felt something cold settle in his stomach. Casualties? Park was reading the full report now, her diplomatic composure finally cracking. 40,000 dead, men, women, children, farmers and teachers and shopkeepers. She looked up at him with eyes that no longer held any trace of diplomatic patience. They justified it by claiming our colonies were established without proper authorization. Lee understood immediately. The same territories that the Council had just refused to grant humanity. The colonies that had existed peacefully for 15 years. The Velkari had used the Council's rejection as an excuse to destroy them. For a moment, neither human spoke. Around them, alien diplomats chatted pleasantly about lunch arrangements and afternoon meetings. The galaxy's business continued, as usual. Send a message to Earth Command, Park said finally, her voice steady again but carrying a new edge. Tell them we're done asking for permission. Lee nodded. He had served in 3 border conflicts, always fighting by galactic rules of engagement, always showing restraint, always proving that humans could be civilized. 40,000 civilians would never have the chance to be civilized again. As they walked toward the human embassy, Lee noticed something he had never seen before. Park So-jin was smiling. It was not the diplomatic smile she used in council sessions. It was something else entirely, something that would have reminded the galaxy's species why they had classified Earth as a death world in the first place, if they had been smart enough to recognize it. General Choi Min-ho stood in the war room deep beneath Luna Station, staring at the holographic display that showed human space. Red markers indicated the 3 destroyed colonies. For the first time in over a century, humanity was preparing for unrestricted warfare. Around the circular table sat the most dangerous humans in the galaxy, though no alien would have recognized them as such. They looked ordinary enough, middle-aged men and women in simple military uniforms, but each one commanded forces that had been deliberately kept secret from galactic oversight. "The Velkari made a mistake," General Choi said quietly. "They think we're the same species that begged for scraps at the council table yesterday. They're about to learn otherwise." Admiral Han Yu-jin pulled up the tactical displays. Her fleet had been scattered across human space for months, disguised as cargo, vessels, and mining platforms. No alien intelligence service had bothered to count them properly. Why would they? Everyone knew humans only had defensive capabilities. "Protocol Lazarus is ready for activation," she reported. 47 capital ships, 300 destroyers, and over 800 support craft, all equipped with technologies the galaxy has never seen. Dr. Yoon Hae-rin opened her classified files on alien psychology and biology. For decades, she had studied every species in the galaxy while serving as a simple xenobiologist. Her real job had been much more important. "The fundamental problem with our enemies," she began, "is that they evolved on easy worlds, garden planets with stable weather, abundant food, and few predators. They developed sophisticated cultures because they never needed to fight for survival." She activated a biological display showing various alien species. "Look at the Velkari. 4 arms, excellent fine motor control, perfect for complex technology, but their reflexes are slow. Their pain tolerance is low. They've never had to adapt quickly to changing conditions. The Merengi are worse," she continued, highlighting the slug-like traders. "Their entire society is built on predictable economic models. They can't function when their carefully planned systems are disrupted. Chaos terrifies them." Colonel Nam Ji-woo leaned forward. "What about the Zarathi? They've got those harmonic communication systems. Seems advanced." "Advanced but fragile," Dr. Yoon replied. "Their technology depends on precise frequency coordination. Disrupt those frequencies and their entire infrastructure collapses. They've never had to develop backup systems because their homeworld never challenged them." General Choi nodded slowly. "So they're sophisticated but not adaptable, civilized but not dangerous." "Exactly, they fight wars like chess games. Careful moves, established rules, predictable outcomes. The idea of truly vicious combat is foreign to them." Engineer Seo Kyung-mi spoke up from her position at the technical display. "While they were perfecting energy weapons and defensive shields, we kept developing kinetic systems, railguns, missile clusters, and good old-fashioned explosives. Their shields are designed to stop beam weapons, not solid projectiles moving at 30% of light speed." Admiral Han smiled grimly. "Their ships are built like floating cities, beautiful, comfortable, and completely unprepared for real combat. Our vessels are built like wolves, fast, deadly, and designed to hunt." Commander Kim Tae-ho had been quiet until now. As head of the defense fleet, he had spent years following galactic military protocols, fighting with one hand tied behind his back, using only approved weapons and tactics that wouldn't upset the established order. "The hardest part," he said, "will be convincing our own people. Human soldiers have been trained to show restraint. For generations, we've been the good guys, the ones who follow the rules. The rules just got 40,000 of our civilians killed. General Choi replied coldly. I think our people will adapt. Dr. Yoon pulled up historical files from Earth's archives. Humans spent 2 million years learning to survive on the most dangerous planet in known space. Every other species we've encountered evolved in paradise. When we stop holding back, it won't be a fair fight. That's the point, Admiral Han said. Fair fights are for species that can afford to lose. We can't. The tactical display shifted to show alien military positions throughout the galaxy. The Valkyrie had 17 star systems with substantial naval forces. The Merengi controlled the major trade routes. The Zarathi maintained communication networks that linked dozens of worlds. Phase 1, General Choi explained, is complete withdrawal from all galactic military cooperation. Our forces are already pulling back to human space. The aliens think we're sulking. Phase 2, Admiral Han continued, is intelligence gathering. We know where their important assets are located. We know how their command structures work. They know almost nothing about our real capabilities. Colonel Nam opened a secure file containing decades of preparation. Special Operations has been mapping alien facilities for years. We have detailed plans for disrupting their infrastructure, capturing key personnel, and destroying their ability to coordinate responses. Phase 3 is the demonstration, Engineer SEO added. One overwhelming strike that shows them exactly what we can do when we stop playing by their rules. Commander Kim studied the fleet dispositions. The Kepler 442 system. That's where they're staging their next attacks on human colonies. 3 jump gates, major supply depot, and the Valkyrie 3rd Fleet. Perfect target, Admiral Han agreed. Strategically important but isolated enough that we can hit it without triggering galaxy-wide panic immediately. Dr. Yoon highlighted the psychological profiles of the Valkyrie commanders in that system. Lord General Vexkoth is typical of their military leadership. Brave by their standards, experienced in formal warfare but completely unprepared for predator tactics. He'll try to fight honorably. That will be his mistake, Colonel Nam said quietly. General Choi looked around the table at his commanders. These were humans who had grown up hearing stories about Earth's ancient wars. They understood concepts that the galaxy's civilized species had forgotten. Surprise attacks, psychological warfare, fighting to win rather than fighting to prove. Points. Questions? He asked. Engineer Seo raised her hand. Rules of engagement? There are no rules anymore, General Choi replied. The Valkyrie killed our civilians. They declared unrestricted warfare the moment they opened fire on non-combatants. Commander Kim nodded grimly. What about collateral damage? Minimize it. Where practical, but mission success comes first. The galaxy needs to understand that attacking human civilians has consequences. Admiral Han was already calculating transit times. My ships can be in position within 72 hours. The aliens won't see us coming. They never do, Dr. Yoon observed. That's what happens when predators hunt prey animals. The prey never realizes it's being stalked until it's too late. The meeting began to break up as each commander received their specific orders. Decades of secret preparation were finally being put into action. Admiral Han's hidden fleet would emerge from the shadows. Colonel Nam's special forces would begin their infiltration missions. Engineer Seo's weapons would be tested in actual combat. As the others filed out, General Choi remained behind with Dr. Yoon. They stood looking at the display showing human space. 17 colonies, 30 billion people, all protected by a military that had been deliberately underestimated for over a century. Do you think they'll surrender when they realize what they're facing? Dr. Yoon asked. General Choi was quiet for a long moment. The smart ones will. The rest will learn why Earth is classified as a death world. Outside the war room, human military bases throughout the galaxy were receiving new orders. Ship captains who had spent years following galactic peacekeeping protocols were being told to prepare for actual war. Marine units that had trained in non-lethal suppression techniques were switching to combat loadouts. The galaxy was about to discover the difference between humans who were trying to be civilized and humans who were trying to survive. The Velkhari had wanted to test humanity's resolve. They were about to get their answer. Captain Lim Junseo watched the Kepler 442 system through the view screen of his ship, the Silent Thunder. 3 months ago, this had been empty space. Now it bristled with Velkhari military installations and patrol ships. They had turned it into a fortress, the launching point for their attacks on human colonies. The Velkhari had no idea he was there. The Silent Thunder was unlike any ship the galaxy had seen before. Where alien vessels were large and heavily armored, broadcasting their presence with energy signatures visible from light years away, the Silent Thunder was a shadow. Black hull coating absorbed sensor beams. Minimal energy output made it invisible to most detection systems. It moved through space like a predator stalking prey. "Sensor report," Captain Lim said quietly. Lieutenant Commander Bei Yun-jung checked her displays. 53 Velkhari vessels in system, 12 capital ships, 26 destroyers, 15 support craft. They're maintaining standard patrol patterns around the jump gates. Standard patterns, Sergeant Major Oh Sang-wook muttered from his position at the Marine station. Predictable. They're still fighting by their rules. Captain Lim nodded. The Velkhari military doctrine was based on honor and established tradition. Their ships moved in formation. Their patrols followed regular schedules. Their commanders announced their presence and demanded formal surrender before attacking, all of which made them easy targets for humans who had learned warfare on a world where predictability meant death. "Communications intercept?" Captain Lim asked. "Lord General Vexkoth is aboard the flagship Pride of Velkhari," reported the communications officer. "He's planning to launch another attack on the agricultural colonies in Sector 9. 50,000 more human civilians." The bridge fell silent. Every human aboard knew someone who had died in the first attacks. Farm workers, teachers, children. People who had never held weapons, killed for the crime of living on worlds the Velkhari wanted to claim. "Target priority?" Sergeant Major O asked. Captain Lim studied the tactical display. In a traditional battle, he would target the flagship. First, destroy the enemy commander and disrupt their coordination. But humans had learned different lessons from their death world. "We start with the support ships," he said. "Supply vessels, communication relays, medical stations. We make them afraid before we make them fight." Lieutenant Commander Bei looked puzzled. "That seems inefficient. Why not hit the capital ships directly?" "Because we're not trying to win a battle," Captain Lim explained. "We're teaching a lesson. The galaxy needs to understand what happens when you attack human civilians." The first target was a Velkhari supply depot orbiting the third planet. It was lightly defended, considered safe behind the screen of patrol ships. The depot contained food, fuel, and medical supplies for the entire fleet. The Silent Thunder emerged from stealth mode directly above the depot. For exactly 30 seconds, it was visible on every sensor in the system. Long enough for the Velkhari to see it, not long enough for them to respond. The human ship's weapons were unlike anything the Velkhari had encountered. Where aliens used energy beams that could be deflected by shields, humans had perfected kinetic warfare. Solid projectiles moving at incredible speed. Simple physics, impossible to stop. The supply depot disintegrated under the railgun bombardment. 40 years of accumulated supplies scattered into space in a cloud of debris. Then the Silent Thunder vanished again, leaving the Velkhari staring at empty space. "What was that?" Lord General Vexkoth demanded from his flagship bridge. "Report!" His sensor officer struggled to make sense of the readings. "Unknown vessel, approximately frigate class. Appeared for 30 seconds, destroyed supply station. 7, then disappeared." Disappeared? Ships don't disappear. Sir, it's not showing up on any of our sensors now. Lord General Vexkoth had fought 12 battles in his career, always following proper military protocol. Enemies announced themselves. They demanded surrender. They fought honorably or were destroyed. This was something else entirely. All ships, battle formation, he ordered. Find that vessel. The Velkari fleet spread out across the system, searching for the human ship. Their sensors swept space, looking for energy signatures, gravitational distortions, anything that would reveal the attacker's location. They found nothing because they were looking for the wrong things. The silent thunder struck again an hour later. This time the target was a communication relay near the fourth planet. The relay coordinated messages between the fleet and Velkari High Command. Without it, Lord General Vexkoth would have to rely on ship-to-ship communication only. Again, the human ship appeared for exactly 30 seconds. Again, it destroyed its target with weapons the Velkari couldn't understand. Again, it vanished before they could respond. "This is impossible!" Vexkoth raged. "No ship can move that fast." But the silent thunder wasn't moving fast. It was moving smart. Captain Lim had studied Velkari patrol patterns for weeks. He knew where their ships would be and when. He positioned his vessel in their sensor shadows, using the aliens' own ships to hide from their detection systems. The third attack came 6 hours later, a medical station treating wounded Velkari soldiers from the colony attacks. Captain Lim watched through the view screen as escape pods launched from the station before his railguns turned it into scrap metal. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Bay reported, "we're receiving surrender broadcasts from 3 Velkari support ships. They're asking for terms." "Ignore them," Captain Lim replied. "We're not here to accept surrenders." Sergeant Major O understood. This wasn't about capturing enemy vessels or controlling territory. This was about fear, about showing the galaxy that attacking human civilians would have consequences they couldn't imagine. By the 10th hour, the Velkari fleet was in chaos. Half their support infrastructure was gone. Communication was breaking down. Supply ships were trying to flee the system. The proud fleet that had bombarded human colonies was falling apart without a single ship-to-ship battle. "Lord General," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving messages from 17 different ships requesting permission to withdraw from the system." Vexkoth stared at the tactical display. His fleet still outnumbered the enemy 50-1. His capital ships were undamaged. By all military logic, he should be winning this engagement, but logic assumed the enemy would fight by established rules. The human ship appeared and disappeared like a ghost. It struck without warning, destroyed its target, and vanished before return fire was possible. It was fighting like a predator, not like a civilized military force. "Sir, should I authorize the withdrawal?" his officer asked. "No!" Vexkoth snapped. "We are Velkari. We do not flee from a single enemy vessel." That was when the silent thunder materialized directly in front of the flagship, close enough that both ships' hulls were visible on the main screen. For a moment, nobody moved. The Velkari bridge crew stared at the sleek, dark human ship that had been terrorizing their fleet. It looked nothing like the bulky, heavily armored vessels they were used to fighting. It was built for speed and surprise, like a hunting animal. "All weapons, fire!" Vexkoth commanded. The flagship's energy beams lanced out toward the human ship. They struck nothing but empty space. The silent thunder had already moved, sliding sideways with impossible grace. The Velkari ship was too large, too slow to track such a fast target. Then the human ship opened fire. The railgun slugs punched through the flagship's shields like they weren't there. Energy shields were designed to deflect beams and plasma, not solid metal moving at relativistic speeds. The pride of Velkari shuddered under impacts that its defensive systems couldn't stop. But Captain Lim wasn't trying to destroy the flagship. He was making a point. The railgun fire carefully targeted the ship's weapon systems, leaving the hull intact. One by one, the Velkari flagship's guns went silent. Then the silent thunder destroyed the ship's engines, leaving it drifting helplessly. "This is Captain Lim Junseo of the Human Federation," came the transmission. "Lord General Vexkoth, you are now my prisoner. Prepare to be boarded." Boarded? Vexkoth couldn't believe what he was hearing. You can't board a capital ship with a single frigate. But Sergeant Major O's Marines were already launching their assault pods. Unlike the large, obvious boarding craft that aliens used, these were small, fast, and nearly invisible. They attached to the Velkari hull like parasites and began cutting their way inside. The Velkari crew had never faced human Marines in close combat. They discovered that humans moved differently in confined spaces. They used the ship's own corridors and ventilation systems against its defenders. They appeared from unexpected directions and attacked with weapons designed for shipboard fighting. Within 2 hours, Lord General Vexkoth found himself in his own brig, staring at Sergeant Major. "Oh, through the force field. This is impossible," he kept repeating. "One ship cannot defeat an entire fleet." "We didn't defeat your fleet," O replied calmly. "We just showed them what real warfare looks like." Around the system, the remaining Velkari ships were fleeing toward the jump gates. Without their commander, without supplies, and faced with an enemy they couldn't understand, the proud fleet had collapsed. The silent thunder let them go. The lesson was complete. Captain Lim stood on his bridge, watching the last Velkari ships disappear into jump space. In 12 hours, Fleet Admiral Quan Hyo Jin stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, watching dozens of human ships emerge from jump space simultaneously. The galaxy had never seen anything like this coordinated assault. While alien species fought, one battle at a time, humans were striking everywhere at once. "Fleet status report," she commanded. "All task forces report ready, Admiral," her communications officer replied. "Operation Hammer is go for execution." Across 17 different star systems, human forces were beginning the largest military campaign in galactic history. But this wasn't the traditional warfare that aliens understood. This was something much more dangerous. Captain Ryu Woo-sung materialized on the bridge via hologram from his intelligence ship. "Phase 1 targets are confirmed. Merengue financial centers in 12 systems are ready for infiltration. My teams are in position." The Merengue Confederation controlled galactic trade through a network of financial institutions that processed every major transaction in known space. They had grown wealthy by taking a percentage of everything, confident that their economic power made them untouchable. They had never faced humans who understood economic warfare. "Begin infiltration," Admiral Quan ordered. In the Altair system, Merengue Trade Central processed over 3 billion transactions daily. The massive space station was protected by the most advanced computer security in the galaxy. The slug-like Merengue believed their systems were impenetrable. They were wrong. Captain Ryu's intelligence teams didn't attack the station's defenses. Instead, they had spent months learning how Merengue systems worked. They understood that the aliens' strength was also their weakness. The Merengue had built one perfect network that handled everything. If that network could be corrupted from within, their entire economy would collapse. The attack began with something simple: a software update that every Merengue facility received, automatically. Hidden in millions of lines of normal code was a small change. Transaction records would still process correctly, but they would also create phantom accounts that siphoned tiny amounts from each transfer. Within hours, the Merengue financial network was transferring billions of credits to accounts that didn't officially exist. The slug-like aliens watched in horror as their carefully balanced economy began to tear itself apart. "This is impossible!" Trade Minister Clicksith screamed at his technical staff. "Our systems don't have errors." "Sir, it's not an error," his chief programmer reported. "Someone has rewritten our core financial protocols. Every transaction is being duplicated and redirected." "Then fix it." "We can't. The changes are integrated into every system. To remove them, we'd have to shut down the entire galactic trade network." Meanwhile, in the Vega sector, the crystalline Zorathi were facing their own nightmare. Scientist Li Ne Young's sonic weapons had been deployed against their harmonic communication systems. The Zorathi were perhaps the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. Their crystal-based biology allowed them to communicate across vast distances using precise frequency harmonics. Their entire civilization was built around this ability to coordinate perfectly. That coordination became their downfall when humans learned to turn it against them. The attack began subtly. Human ships broadcast frequencies that were almost identical to Zorathi communications, but slightly off-tune. Like an orchestra where one instrument was playing in the wrong key, the result was chaos. Zorathi ships trying to coordinate their defenses found themselves receiving contradictory orders. Their communication networks carried messages that seemed authentic, but contained instructions that made no sense. Within hours, the most organized military force in the galaxy was paralyzed by its own communication system. "Our frequencies are being jammed," reported the Zorathi fleet commander to his homeworld. "No, wait. They're being mimicked. The humans are broadcasting false harmonics." "Filter out the false signals," his superior ordered. "We can't. They're using our own communication protocols against us. Every message could be real or fake. We have no way to tell the difference." In the Procyon system, Major Park Chan-woo's Marines were conducting the most personal mission of the campaign. 3 human colonies had been under Velkari occupation for 2 months. 50,000 civilians were being held as prisoners, forced to work in mining operations under brutal conditions. The Velkari had expected rescue attempts. They had prepared for human ships to arrive, demanding the release of prisoners through diplomatic channels. They had defensive positions ready to repel any direct assault. What they got instead were humans who had stopped following the rules. Major Park's Marines didn't announce their presence. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't give the enemy time to prepare. They simply appeared in the Velkari camps like ghosts, moving through ventilation systems and service tunnels that the aliens hadn't thought to guard. The first Velkari guards knew of the attack when their communication systems went dead. The second thing they knew was that humans were everywhere at once, appearing from directions that should have been impossible. "Contact the orbital command," a Velkari officer ordered. "Tell them we're under attack." "I can't, sir." "Communications are down." "Then send a messenger shuttle." "The landing bays are sealed. Something has disabled our hangar doors." The Velkari found themselves trapped in their own facilities while human prisoners simply walked out of their cells. The locks had been remotely opened by Marines who understood alien technology better than the aliens did themselves. Within 6 hours, all 3 colonies were free. The Velkari occupiers were prisoners in their own camps, and the human civilians were being evacuated to safety. But the most devastating attack was happening in the core worlds, where the galaxy's communication networks were centered. Captain Ryu's teams had infiltrated the central relay stations that carried messages between species. The attack wasn't physical. It was psychological. Every alien government began receiving messages that appeared to come from their allies, but contained subtle threats or insults. Trade agreements were mysteriously modified during transmission. Military orders became confused or contradictory. Within days, the careful alliances that had kept the galaxy stable for centuries began to crack. The Velkari accused the Merengi of economic manipulation. The Merengi blamed the Zorathi for communication interference. The Zorathi suspected everyone of conspiracy. "This is coordinated," Admiral Kwan observed as intelligence reports flooded in from across the galaxy. "The humans aren't just attacking random targets. They're dismantling the entire power structure that kept us suppressed." Her tactical officer nodded. "Every major system that the aliens use to control galactic politics is under assault. Financial networks, communication systems, trade routes, military coordination, they're all failing simultaneously." But the most shocking development came from the Rim territories, where human colonies had been establishing themselves for decades under galactic oversight. Colonies that everyone thought were helpless agricultural settlements. They weren't helpless. They had been preparing. When Velkari forces arrived to pacify more human settlements, they found empty farms and abandoned towns. Then the attacks began. Humans who had been dismissed as simple farmers turned out to be veterans of Earth's military. Settlements that looked defenseless were actually fortified positions. Agricultural equipment had been modified into weapons that the galaxy had never seen. "Sir," a Velkari field commander reported to his superiors, "the human colonies are fighting back. They're not farmers. They're soldiers pretending to be farmers. That's impossible. Intelligence reports confirmed these were civilian settlements." "Intelligence was wrong, sir. These humans have been preparing for war for decades." The truth was spreading through the galaxy faster than the human attacks. For over a century, every species had underestimated humanity. They had seen humans as useful auxiliaries, but never as equals. They had assumed that beings from a death world would be too aggressive and primitive for real leadership. They had been catastrophically wrong. Humans hadn't been unable to match alien capabilities. They had been choosing not to. Every restraint, every limitation, every compromise had been deliberate. Humanity had been playing by rules that their enemies had written, while secretly preparing to play by rules of their own. Now those preparations were bearing fruit across the galaxy. Admiral Quan received reports from 17 different battle zones. Human forces were winning everywhere, not through superior firepower, but through superior tactics. They fought like predators from a world where everything was dangerous. They adapted to each enemy's weaknesses and exploited them ruthlessly. Status. "Report on alien government responses?" she asked. "Panic, mostly," her intelligence officer replied. "The Galactic Council is trying to meet, but their communication systems are compromised. Half the member species think the other half are betraying them." "And military response?" "Confused and uncoordinated. They keep trying to fight us the way they fight each other. Formal battles, established rules, predictable tactics. It's not working." Admiral Quan nodded grimly. The galaxy's civilized species had forgotten the most basic truth of survival. When someone wants to kill you, being civilized won't save your life. Humans had never forgotten that lesson. The war was far from over, but its outcome was already becoming clear. President Kim Soo-jin stood at the observation deck of the space station New Geneva, built in the ruins of what had once been the Galactic Council headquarters. 1 year had passed since humanity stopped asking for permission. The galaxy looked very different now. Below her, in the station's main conference room, representatives from 47 alien species waited nervously for the meeting to begin. But this time, humanity was setting the terms. The woman who had once been Ambassador Park So-jin, who had endured years of condescending dismissals and diplomatic humiliation, was now the elected leader of the Human Federation. The transformation had been remarkable, but perhaps not surprising. Humans had always been good at adapting. "Are they all here?" she asked Director Nam Ji-woo, who had become head of Human Intelligence Services. "All the ones that matter," he replied. "The Velkari sent what's left of their government. The Merengi are represented by their Emergency Trade Council. The Zarathi managed to coordinate long enough to send a delegation." President Kim nodded and walked toward the conference room. Grand Admiral Choi Min-ho and Dr. Yoon Hae-rin followed behind her. The same team that had planned humanity's awakening would now oversee the new galactic order. The conference room fell silent as the humans entered. President Kim took her seat at the head of the table, with the alien representatives arranged in a circle around her. The symbolism was deliberate. No species sat higher than others. No one claimed special authority, except humanity, which had earned its position through strength. "Thank you all for coming," President Kim began, her voice carrying the same diplomatic politeness she had once used to beg for colony rights. "I know many of your governments are still adjusting to recent events. Former Chancellor Vexthul of the Velkari sat hunched in his chair. The proud leader who had once dismissed humanity as useful auxiliaries now looked like a broken old man. His hegemony had collapsed after humanity demonstrated what unrestricted warfare actually meant. 17 star systems that had once obeyed Velkari commands now governed themselves. "You destroyed our civilization," he said quietly. "No," President Kim replied calmly. "We ended your ability to destroy others. Your civilization is rebuilding itself on principles of equality rather than dominance. Many of your people seem happier with the change." This was true. Without the Velkari military constantly demanding resources for expansion and conquest, the average Velkari citizen had discovered that peace was actually quite pleasant. Trade had increased, living standards had improved, and their children weren't dying in pointless wars. Trade Minister Clixith of the Merengi spoke next. "Our economic networks are still recovering from your attacks. Trillions of credits were lost. Trillions of credits that you had stolen from other species through manipulated exchange rates and hidden fees," Dr. Yoon pointed out. "Our audit of your systems revealed systematic fraud going back decades." The Merengi trade minister's skin color shifted to an embarrassed pale green. The human economic warfare had done more than disrupt their financial networks. It had exposed the corruption that had made them wealthy while keeping other species poor. Representative Ziltar of the Zorathi spoke in harmonics that the translation systems converted to words. "Your sonic attacks permanently damaged our communication infrastructure. Some of our colonies are still cut off from the main networks, and those colonies are discovering that they can govern themselves quite effectively without constant direction from the homeworld," Grand Admiral Choi observed. "Independence seems to agree with them." This pattern had repeated across the galaxy. Species that had been tightly controlled by central authorities were learning that local autonomy actually worked better. The Zorathi colonies that had been isolated by human attacks were now more prosperous than they had ever been under direct oversight. President Kim activated the holographic display that showed the current state of galactic politics. Where once there had been a few dominant powers controlling dozens of subordinate species, now there were hundreds of independent systems cooperating through voluntary agreements. "The old order is gone," she announced. "The age of galactic empires and subject species has ended. What we build next is up to all of us." "What do you want?" asked a representative of the Thexian Republic, a small species that had been under Velkari protection for centuries. President Kim smiled. It was not the predatory expression that had terrified alien commanders during the war. It was something warmer, more hopeful. "We want what we always wanted. The right to live freely, govern ourselves, and determine our own future. The difference is that now we're in a position to ensure that right for everyone." She pulled up a document that had been prepared by teams of human and alien legal experts working together. "The new Galactic Compact, a framework for cooperation between equal species, with no empires, no subject peoples, and no special privileges based on technological superiority or military power." Former Chancellor Vexthul looked up from his despondent slouch. "And if we refuse to sign, then you refuse," President Kim replied simply. "No one will force you to join, but you'll also receive no protection if you return to your old ways of conquering weaker species." Grand Admiral Choi leaned forward slightly. "The Human Defense Force will guarantee the independence of any species that requests protection from aggression. We've proven quite effective at that role." The alien representatives exchanged glances. Everyone in the room knew what human military protection meant now. It meant that aggressive species would face the full fury of beings who had learned warfare on the most dangerous world in known space. But it also meant something else. Species that had spent centuries being bullied by stronger neighbors could finally live in peace. "What about reparations?" Trade Minister Clixth asked. The economic damage from your campaign will be paid by the species responsible for the original attacks, President Kim replied. The Velkari authorized the destruction of human colonies. They will compensate the families of the dead and pay for reconstruction. We don't have those resources, Vexthul protested. Then you'll work to earn them, Director Nam said coldly. Human civilians died because of your decisions. Their families deserve justice. Dr. Yoon activated another display showing galactic demographics. There's something else you should all understand. Humans aren't the only Deathworld species in the galaxy. We've been in contact with 17 other races that evolved on hostile planets. They've been watching our progress with great interest. The alien representatives paled at this news. The idea that there might be more species like humanity, all potentially as dangerous when pushed too far, was terrifying. But, Dr. Yoon continued, they're also interested in the peaceful coexistence we're proposing. It turns out that most Deathworld species prefer cooperation to conquest. We're simply very good at the alternative when necessary. President Kim stood and walked to the great windows overlooking space. Ships from dozens of different species moved peacefully through the station's traffic patterns. Human vessels worked alongside alien craft, no longer as subordinates, but as equals. The galaxy is learning a new way to exist, she said, based on mutual respect rather than fear, on cooperation rather than dominance, on the understanding that every species has the right to determine its own future. She turned back to face the assembled representatives. But make no mistake, this new order exists because humanity was willing to fight for it. We stopped playing by rules written by others and started enforcing rules that protect everyone. One by one, the alien representatives signed the new Galactic Compact. Some did so eagerly, grateful for protection from stronger neighbors. Others signed reluctantly, understanding that refusal meant facing humanity alone. As the meeting ended and the aliens filed out to return to their homeworlds, President Kim remained at the window with her advisors. Do you think it will last? Dr. Yoon asked. As long as we're willing to enforce it, Grand Admiral Choi replied. Peace requires strength to back it up. President Kim nodded slowly. The galaxy called it the day the Deathworlders stopped playing fair. But we know the truth. It was the day we stopped letting others write the rules for us. Far below, in the station's education center, human children played with alien children, of a dozen different species. They spoke in a mixture of languages, shared games from different worlds, and grew up thinking that equality between species was natural. These children would never know a galaxy where some species ruled and others served. They would never understand why their parents' generation had found it remarkable that beings from different worlds could be friends. To them, the new order would simply be the way things had always been. President Kim watched them play and smiled. The war was over. The real victory was just beginning. In the end, humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy. They had simply taught it to be better than it was. And that, perhaps, was the most human thing of all.